Okay.
Okay, for medical services, we had Dr. Smith and
Mhm.
Dr. Bristol, and both had offices in their homes in Dayton, and they even made house calls.
They made house calls. Okay.
And they would have a draw. They already had pills for you. I mean, because at that time, the only pharmacy was in New Brunswick.
Okay.
Siegel's Pharmacy was on French Street. Okay, and then Siegel's opened up in later years at the where the Think Grill just went out of business. That was Siegel's Pharmacy for many years, so that you didn't have to depend on the doctor handing you pills.
Okay. As you said, French Street, so that's actually that's New Brunswick.
Yeah.
You're saying okay.
Takes you down to the railroad station.
So we talked about what your parents did in their off time. What other types of organization did your family? I mean, you had the church. Is there any other kind of
Mom was
organizations?
in the Grange.
Okay, and tell me about that.
It was kind of a down home kind of thing. They'd have dinners and their meetings. I didn't go to the meetings or anything, but it was held over there in the Dayton area. And I think that's 522.
Okay.
It's still there. I don't know what purposes it's used for now, but
But what was the Grange? What was the idea behind the Grange, behind the organization?
the farmers.
So the farmers
would, if they talk about problems and, solutions to things.
So it was a meeting place for
Yeah, for
farmers.
mostly the farmers.
Okay. Okay. What was your first job outside of your home? Maybe as a teenager, or was it later than that?
Let me see. I worked on places on Jersey Avenue. One was Zonite, and I did filing there. I worked at a place where they packaged up big packs of paper, and you had to put them in the paper. They didn't have the machines to package it all. Worked at Mack Trucks in Plainville. My dad got me a job there because in later years he worked for Mack Trucks. He also worked for Herman Forwarding, which is still here in town. So they were pretty much factory jobs that I'd had to do.
And so with that money, I mean, did you have to contribute any money back to the house, or was that your money to keep that you earned there?
I think by the time I was doing that, I was trying to put some money away to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point I had told my parents I had always wanted to teach. And then I started out as academic in high school. And then I realized they were having a hard time with money.
Okay.
And so I said I didn't want to do it. So I became a commercial student. I'm doing the shorthand and the typing and all that stuff. And then finally I fessed up that I really did want to go to school to learn how to teach. And then she said, well, we'll do something. We'll find a way to do it. And then she took on cleaning at one of the office buildings in New Brunswick. And that's when I started at Trenton State, because then I had to switch back to academic real fast and catch up with my courses. And that's actually where I met Lou, because I was a senior taking a junior course, and he was in the geometry class. So that's where we met. And then, so anyway, bottom line was I did graduate general, and I got accepted to Trenton State, where I spent 4 years.
Okay. Hillwood Lakes back then, right?
What?
Hillwood Lakes, that's what they called that
Yes,
area.
yes.
Yeah. Now, did you play sports at all?
Lou always says I was born too soon. I would have loved to have competed with outside schools, but in my day, you didn't. The girls did not form a team or get on a team to go play another school someplace. It was intramural,
Right.
and you built up points. So my girlfriend that lived on Dean's Lane, Nancy Vitale, and I were the first two sophomores ever to conjure up enough points to earn a letter by the end of our sophomore year.
So you got your letter.
Yeah, I got my letter, yeah.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about, I know that you met Lou at Trenton State.
No, high school.
At high school.
Yeah.
So just tell me a little bit more about that part.
Okay. Well, let's put it this way. I met Lou. I was a senior, and he was a junior. And then we started dating, and then I went off to school. But Trenton State had such severe curfews. As a freshman, you had to be in by like 9:30. So how could you date on a Friday night? So I came home because you were always fighting the clock. You couldn't go to a movie or anything. So I was a commuter on the weekends. I think I spent one weekend in the 4 years at Trenton. And then when Lou graduated from high school, he went to Muhlenberg. So he commuted home on the weekends so that we could go out.
Right.
And one day we didn't know where he was. It was a snowstorm on Jugtown Mountain. It took him 12 hours to come home. Why he even started, I will never know.
For normally, how long would it take for a trip like that?
2 hours.
2, okay.
Yeah.
And for you to get all the way to down to Trenton State and back, I mean, today it's a good distance. I think today with traffic it might take, I would say maybe 35, 40 minutes or so. How long did it take back then?
Well, Mom didn't have a heavy foot.
Yeah.
So it probably took us a half hour, but we would go back roads.
Right. So
We
there's
found
no.
a way in the back door at Trenton State.
So there's no traffic. It's just you went a
No,
different
not
way.
really. Not like today. Actually, in September, I have been driving since I am 17. It's a long time. And I'm making a left-hand turn onto Highway 1. And cars were stopped. Slow lane was empty. I go to cross, and next thing I see is a grill. So my little car got totaled in September.
Okay.
Yeah, so Highway 1 traffic is pretty wicked right now.
It's not getting any easier.
No, he admitted he ran the red light.
Well, but you weren't injured.
Well, I'm still having difficulty with my left shoulder.
Oh, so you did
Because
get hurt.
what happened was, I was thankful that I walked away. God was with me, I'll tell you that much.
Right, right.
My car, he tried to make my left front tire my right tire. But I think what I did was I hit the door frame. I had my seatbelt on. But this shoulder blew up like an apple on the outside.
Oh, okay.
And I have good mobility and everything, but I still have discomfort. So that was only in September, so it takes time.
Yeah, that's not that long. I mean, maybe it'll work its way out.
It takes time for the body to heal.
Yeah, especially something like that. And when you first got married, where is it that you lived?
We lived in a little house behind Mom and Dad on Black Horse because
Okay.
he started his graduate school of social work at Rutgers. So we stayed there for 2 years, and then he got a call for some kind of commission in the Air Force or something, and it says if wife is pregnant, prove pregnancy. So there went a rabbit. We found out that I was pregnant with John, so he never went into the military. But we dated for 6 years because, of course, he's Jewish and I'm Lutheran, and we tried to get together, and it worked.
Right, right.
It's worked for going on 58 years.
That's great. So that brings me to the next question. Tell me about your children and how their names were picked, actually.
Well, Susan and John are common names in my mom's family. Everybody, and Paul, they're about, you go into a room, you say Paul, 5 guys will stand up. So they were kind of like family names. And I don't know where I got Gail from, but I just pulled it out of the air, and she's a Gail, first Gail in the family.
So you started maybe a new tradition.
Maybe.
Now tell me about raising children here in South Brunswick. What was it like? What was your experience?
It was fine. This was the neighborhood. There weren't many kids in the neighborhood for them to play with. Weber's across the street, and Greg Rule, now a retired policeman, and he comes over and has coffee with Lou, but like another son. Those were the guys that they played with, and they always found friends that were on the other side of town. Always. One day, John had 2 funny stories. He says, can I go play at Ray's house? And we said, sure. So, made sure it was okay, called the parents, go to pick him up. And his father, kids don't say last names, just Ray.
Right.
It turned out to be Ray Trent, who had played baseball with Lou in high school. They were high school friends and just, separated after a while. You don't stay in touch. So that was one. Then he goes to pick up Wayne, okay, and he goes over to Culver Road. Lady opens the door. He went to grammar school with Wayne's mom, Phyllis. Well, married name was Birkenfall. I don't know her maiden name. Siegel was her maiden name. So I would travel anywhere, but the kids needed somebody to go have a play date with, so I didn't mind doing that. Lou calls me the road runner now too, so some things never change.
So now you're what's it like to be a grandparent now, and you're in the same town too? I mean,
Wonderful.
yeah.
It is the best.
And how many? How many do you have?
We have a total of 8.
Uh-huh.
3 are in town, 4 are in Pennsylvania, and the oldest is in Oregon with the twins.
Oh, okay.
So they've been here twice. They're going on 3 years old in February. And grandchildren are great. But see, I also babysat. I retired from teaching when I was still 58. In July, turned 59. And I started taking care of my grandson, Davy. And then came Stephen, then came Chrissy, and I did some babysitting for my son and his one boy, Jake, who had a fetish for big equipment. So whenever he was in the car, if we saw big equipment moving grounds for development, we would pull over and stop. And one day when they were putting the pipeline in over there was a backhoe, and we went over, and the guy put his hat on him and let him sit in it. It was great. But grandchildren are the best.
It's a good job, right?
It's a good job, but see, when you're around them a lot, you can't let them get away with murder.
Right.
Okay. I remember one time, I used to get my hair done. Okay, so it was kind of like boofy and curly. So one day Jake pulls on it, and I said, no. I gave his hair a little tuck. And then he thought that was funny, I guess, so he pulled again. I tugged again. And then after that, it was nice. He didn't like it.
That's funny. What kind of local organizations or clubs were you involved with in town?
Really, not much. Just church, and then
Church.
running with the kids. Yeah, I also worked full time, and I was teaching in East Brunswick.
So you were commuting and
When you've got
raising
3
family.
kids in the house,
Yeah.
and they're off in different directions, I started to do my work at, like, everybody was in bed at 10 o'clock at night. Then I'd start doing my homework.
Then you do yours.
Okay, so I got to be a night owl. 12 o'clock is a normal time for me to go to bed, even now. But I didn't have time for a lot of things. The kids were involved in sports. I'd go to the sporting events. And I think it's a shame when parents never get to see their kids play. Because when kids are in sports, they are dedicated. They have practices that they do. And then when they finally get a chance to compete, that's your pride and your joy.
Right.
You should see them play. And I know parents that never, ever saw their kids play. I would drive to Red Bank for a tournament. I'd go up. One time we had a van, and we had a tournament in Fords, and then we had to go down to Hamilton. Did I have any common sense in my head that I was loading 8 or 9 guys in my van for liability? No. We just piled them in and drove all the way down to Hamilton for another tournament. But it was fun.
So your family was a big part of what you were doing. So
That was my focal point.
So, I mean, the question I have here is, what are your proudest accomplishments? Well, I can already understand that it's your family.
It's
but,
the kids.
Yeah. So that kind of answered itself. Now, what are some of the biggest changes you've seen in the township over the years? I mean, obviously, when you came in, from the time you didn't have electricity or central heat or telephones.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a big change to today.
Telephones. They used to have party lines.
Party lines, right?
I won't tell you what my mother did. But anyway, I can even remember the exchanges on some of the old phones we had. The changes are good and bad. We had to go so far to get anything. New Brunswick, that's the only place you could go. We're down to Trenton. One time we put my cousin in the car. She lived in Hillside. Would walk down the hill in her street in Hillside and turn the corner, and there would be a sweet shop. So she was out visiting. We said, hey, let's go for a Sunday. We put her in the car. And we're going, and we're going, and we're going. She says, Ag, where are we going? I said, we're going to Breelers in Trenton. So that's where we went.
Brillers on Olden Avenue.
That's right. That's where we took her.
I actually remember Brillers.
Oh, they had some fantastic sundaes and things like that, and the ice cream was good. She thought we were kidnapping her.
Brillers, that's
But,
funny.
you know, I mean, there are good things, okay, with the increase in population and everything, and it has its drawbacks. You know, overcrowding sometimes on the roads, sometimes in the stores if they're not polite. You know, I know a family that when Brunswick Acres was built about 40 years ago, whatever, they wouldn't change their address because Kendall Park then became our post office. When we moved in, it was Franklin Park, but they needed more houses to justify the post office. So they took in Beekman and they took in Henderson. But some of our Henderson Road friends would not switch to Kendall Park address. They'd go up to Franklin Park to get their mail out of the mailbox.
So you look,